I
got
gotta
it.
say, it is so cool to talk to you because I've been a fan since 11/22/63. I
Oh,
gotta say.
sick, man.
I mean, so you played Lee Harvey Oswald, Vince Neil. Like, what is it like now stepping into this role? Because Jesse Evans has a huge legacy in, the whole Western culture.
It's I have to say I really loved fleshing out this story. I love Jesse as a character. He's got such a sense of power and leadership and just sense of himself and his sort of purpose. Whether or not you agree with it, what I love about him is he's just so unapologetically about himself, and that's really fun to play. So I thrived on getting to try and flesh that out. But then also the other aspect that I really love about our story is it's about this beautiful friendship that he has with Billy the Kid, and it goes from great friends who are equals and are taking care of each other to being kind of the bitterest of enemies come the Lincoln County War. And so going, how do we get from here to here? And then just to add a little bit more into that, like when late down in history, Jesse wrote to Billy the Kid to come and break him out of prison when nobody else could, so it goes from friends to enemies to somebody who's clearly very, very still important to Jesse. So I thought that journey, that's the historical journey. That's not what we're creating. That's a historical, factual sort of journey that we've got from the different anecdotes and, the newspaper clippings and whatnot from the time. So it's a really cool story. And you got someone like Michael Hurst, who's great at charting historical characters. And I don't know, just it's a blessing to be a part of this one.
It is amazing to watch because, I mean, these guys are literal badasses. I mean, you don't get these kind of roles in anything but Westerns and superhero films, really. I mean,
kind of.
Is that fun in itself? Just the fact that he is a nuanced character, but he's also he's an awesome badass.
he's a proper badass. I mean, I think, well, the way I like the analogy that you just made with the Marvel sort of superhero world. I think there's a case to be made for the Westerns are a similar escapism of that, as that is genre is. But just that slightly more grounded version. But I also think, the cool aspect of that is, I mean, these guys are from. I always viewed Jesse and his sort of upbringing as a rustler. I saw him as essentially. I studied a lot of gangs leading up to this film. Rather than even watching Westerns, I watched a lot of gang films. I sort of studied some of the gangs in Rio de Janeiro for a period just to kind of get that camaraderie and that culture that they sort of had. So that sort of element is really, really important. Like they have their own little family within that group. Mercenary culture, like those are the sort of worlds that I tried to, I don't know, inject as much of what I learned into it from there. And there is a really cool badass quality about both of those worlds. They're mercenaries it's one of the oldest professions in history, the mercenary culture, and gangs are the same. It's just a fascinating sort of world. So yeah, I really enjoyed that part of it.
What do you think, what would you say drives him? Like, what was the thing that you unpacked from him that was like, okay, this is kind of the thing that motivates him the most?
It's sad to say, I think it's power, greed, and money. And I think those things are very, very powerful aphrodisiacs for anybody. I think Jesse has been so scarred by the trauma of his past and by growing up on the streets and, his father, this is sort of the backstory of it, but like the father having committed suicide and his mother not being, on the scene. I think he's a young man who has been so scarred from his past that he is running as far away from that place of sort of being nothing, of loss, of being, in the muck of the streets. He just never wants to be there. He wants to try and I always saw his struggle as a class struggle. He's trying to get into that next echelon of class, and just really like make something of himself in this world. And the only way he knows to make something of himself is his incredible skill set. And and historically, he was the leader. He led the Seven Rivers Gang. He was a foreman for John Chisholm. He brought Billy the Kid into the war. He was central to the Lincoln County War in as far as we know, in some ways guiding the strategy of how to fight the battles there. So he puts himself into positions of leadership and power, and I don't know, yeah.
And he seems like a natural leader too. Like the way you portrayed him, he takes charge. Like
yeah. I think he's a doer. I just saw him as a very, very pragmatic, very physical, kind of the earth sort of person. He just very, very confident in himself, absolute confidence in himself. I think the fact that he could lose a fight, a pistol draw or anything makes no sense to him. He can't even imagine that world where he wouldn't come out on top. And historically, that's I kind of took some of this from, there's this saying in a lot of the different histories that between Billy and Jesse, their skill sets are so great as far as gunmen go, but and they became enemies, but they never had it out. They never officially had a shootout. And there was this sort of saying that went around of, one's afraid and the other one's glad of it. And that kind of, that's sort of how I viewed him. They're both so good. They're both so exceptionally good and confident. But they also have this beautiful, they have a love for each other. They have a friendship. They have a brotherhood. And they have a weird respect for each other. So historically, they never had it out. So, but season 2, we'll see. Maybe we will. Well,
that was the other thing I was going to ask you is, you've kind of described them as brothers, but there's this funny connection between them that isn't, I'm not sure I call it brothers. I'm not sure. It's certainly not friendship exactly, but there's some sort of thing going on there. Do you have a better way of describing it?
Yeah, I think ultimately Jesse would love it to be about brothers. I think it's about survival. I always saw this relationship as it's survival. These guys, Jesse's at such a level in how he runs his life, how he runs the gang. He wants somebody he can actually run with. He wants somebody he can go over the cliff with. And, I think ultimately Jesse would like to build something. I always saw him as a bit of as a businessman. He's an opportunist, but I also think he sees a grander picture of things. And I think he's smart enough to know, like, to choose situations. He was somebody who was sort of a meteor through the Lincoln County War and was central to everything Lincoln County War. And then ultimately, unlike Billy, who stayed and, kept fighting and went on the run with Pat Garrett, decided that, this is enough. I'm done with this lifestyle. I'm just going to walk away. And he walked out of the history pages. And I think that says something about his intellect and his understanding of the world and where this is all headed if he doesn't choose a better choice. I never saw him as an impulsive figure. I always saw him as and again, it's historically they talk about him as very cool, calm, and collected.
Well, the other thing is I'm really curious to see where he's going to go, because the idea that all we know is that he vanished, I can't wait to see how that's going to play out, I guess. But for you far.
Me too. I can't wait to hear what Michael's got in store.
Well, what was your favorite scene so far? What was the best moment that you just felt you kind of got to dig your fists right in there?
There's honestly, this one is one where there's too many to count. It was such a brilliant shoot. We were shooting out in Canada, in the wild of Canada, in Alberta, the Rockies in the background, moose walking through set, mountain lions walking around. Like, it was just, we're racing horses, we're stealing cattle, longhorned cattle. It was an extraordinary experience with some really great people. And I guess the one thing that I really loved doing was this quiet little scene that I had with Tom Blythe, who plays Billy the Kid, towards the end of the shoot, where is coming episode 7, so I can't give too much away, but they actually have a conversation, which is the closest they've gotten to articulating their differences and values that we really see in the show. And I really like that opportunity of actually getting to have a conversation about it and seeing a little bit of like why these two people, while they really want to get together and be good mates, they keep butting heads. So it was a scene that wasn't about the action and all the fun adventure of the show. It was something that was, I don't know, just deepened and clarified some things for me about the relationship.
That's cool.
And where both of them were, like what Jesse wants and what Billy wants.
What is fascinating, because from what I know already, just the drive of Billy the Kid, or William, whatever you want to call him. I mean, he's very much I don't want to say not freedom fighter, but like there's a vengeance in him that he wants to make things right almost. So I'll be curious to see where Jesse lines up in his view of the world, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I think Billy, the words like fairness and justice are really important for Billy, whereas I think Jesse thinks those are nice words. You know what I mean? I think he knows that the world is corrupt, and things like justice and fairness is something that doesn't exist, and you sort of have to take what you want from the world. If it's by force, then that's the way you have to do it.
Well, I'm curious otherwise, like, are you a fan of Westerns? Have you watched many growing up or anything, or is this kind of new territory for you?
I wouldn't say they were, but for the longest time, Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid was my favorite film. It's not so much anymore, but probably around 19 or so, I can't tell you how many times I watched that film and wanted to be Robert Redford, you know, and laughed at that antics those two got up to. So yes and no. I've watched obviously a lot more since this job, and I really love the genre now. I like the genre more so the sort of 2000s pieces that have come out. I think they're a little bit less sort of archetypal and less formulaic. They're sort of questioning this. I mean, even our show, we're looking at essentially what I would say the anti-heroes of the West, rather than the Western heroes saving a society. I mean, although, you know, I guess we're making a bit of a case that Billy is exactly as you say, fighting for justice. But we're also examining someone like Jesse in quite a powerful way, and even more so next season. And I just find that examination really fascinating.
Do you know anything about what might be coming in season 2, or is it all just what you're hoping for?
I know I get it. Jesse gets himself into a lot of trouble. That's what I know. I mean, I've read a lot of history, so I know what's coming, but how it comes out, well, that's a mystery even to me, and I can't wait to see just how much trouble we can get ourselves into next season. I think it's going to be an incredible season, because this first season is really a build and a real setup. One in like getting everybody to understand Billy and his journey, but then also setting the stage for what was an incredible political, bureaucratic, merchant sort of warfare that happened, private war that happened in Lincoln County, and sort of setting that stage. I think the stage is set now for the war. Basically, that's my take on it. We'll see what Michael has in mind.
And that's what I love about it, though, is that it put in so much work to creating this context and layers and history and everything else, that you understand it better than I've ever seen Billy the Kid or these kind of stories told before.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, this period of time and these people, everybody's surrounding Billy. Billy's a fascinating figure, but the politics and the bureaucracy that surrounded him and made him Billy the Kid, I think that is. I'm surprised it hasn't been made into a show before now, because it is so rich with story, with character, with corruption, with everything you could ever want storytelling wise. And it's just a good historical read, the history, let alone the dramatized version of it.
Well, it's fascinating because the characters he hung around with, what we know of them, are just as fascinating, including Jesse and Pat Garrett and so many others. So it's cool to see where season 2 might go.
I mean, I'd never heard of Jesse Evans. He's never a name that's popped up in the stories, and he was so central to Billy being Billy, to the Lincoln County War. And I really loved being able to try and create that figure for the audiences and try and get to my own understanding of him. And yeah, he's just an interesting kind of enigmatic guy who disappeared into history, and I think got swallowed by the shadow of the mythic size that Billy became. And we're getting to, like a lot of other figures in this story, tease them out a bit more. So yes, it's really a cool show to do. It's one of those fun ones. It's a joyous sort of experience.
That's awesome. Well, thank you so much for the time. It's really cool to chat about this.
Thanks, man. I love Canada, honestly, because I know you're Canadian, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, when we shot 11/22 in.
I know. I've actually been through the towns where you guys shot. If you guys didn't have such awful winters, I would live there 100%. Well, thank you so much for the time. I hope I get to talk to you again for season 2, and have a great one.
Thanks very much, Andrea. You too. Have a good one, mate.